Happy New Year, readers, and welcome to Goddess Garden Book Chat. I'm so glad that you're here as always. You know, it means the world to me. And I know that I've done a couple of posts in the month of January alluding to our big read in February. And I said I wasn't going to do any book reviews. I know, I said that. But I just read Hunting Game by Candice Fox. And before I get into my personal perspective, I wanted to share this good book because that's what I'm all about here. And it seems like I can't stay away. I tried, but you have no idea how many books I have locked and loaded. So saying that I could go a month without talking about it was kind of crazy on my part. So enjoy this deep dive, and I'll see you on the other side with my personal perspective.
Welcome back, everyone, to Goddess Garden Book Chat. It feels so good to be kicking off 2025 with all of you.
Happy New Year.
It's really amazing to see this community grow and to know that we're all on this journey together, discovering amazing stories and really getting deep with them.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, your passion for these deep dives is so inspiring.
Well, you guys inspire us too.
Yeah.
So for our first deep dive of the year, we are going to be tackling Candice Fox's Hunting Game. And let me tell you, this book is intense, especially when it comes to the themes of family and justice.
Oh, absolutely. What struck me most was how Fox presents us with these two sets of parents who are both grappling with these just unimaginable situations. You know, on the one hand, you have the parents who are victims, who are driven to extremes by the loss of their child.
Then on the other hand, you have the parents who have committed these terrible acts, often motivated by this desperate and maybe even twisted love for their own children.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting because both sides are fueled by this primal love for their children, but the consequences of their actions are vastly different. It forces us to ask, where's the line? Can love truly justify anything?
That is a tough question, and Fox does not shy away from the complexities. You know, in the book, we see a mother who is willing to break the law and risk everything just to uncover the truth about her missing child. And that level of desperation, I mean, it's heartbreaking.
It really highlights the lengths to which a parent will go when driven by that kind of fierce love. But then you have other parents who make these horrifying choices, decisions that bring harm to others, all in the name of protecting their own.
So on one hand, you have this love that is driving people to seek justice. And on the other hand, that same love is driving people to commit injustice. It's like this double-edged sword. It makes you wonder if you can ever fully judge the actions of a parent without understanding the depths of their love and their desperation.
It's definitely not black and white. And Fox does such a brilliant job of creating these characters that exist in this moral gray area. You find yourself questioning your own judgments, wondering what you would do if you were faced with similar circumstances.
That's what makes this book so compelling, right? It pushes you to confront this uncomfortable truth that morality isn't always clear-cut. It's messy, it's complicated, and it often comes down to these impossible choices that we have to make in the face of just overwhelming emotions.
And that's where the exploration of the justice system comes in, because Hunting Game doesn't present this legal system as this perfect mechanism for delivering justice. Instead, we see how it can be flawed, slow, and sometimes even fail the very people that it's meant to protect.
That's a great point. We see these characters who are so desperate for some kind of resolution, for some semblance of peace after experiencing this unimaginable loss. But can the law truly provide that when the damage is so deep?
It raises an important question for us as readers. Can we really rely on the system to deliver true justice? Or are there situations where it just falls short? And then what happens when that faith in the system crumbles? Do individuals then feel compelled to take matters into their own hands?
And that is the question that hangs over this entire book, creating this incredible tension between seeking justice within the system and seeking it outside of it. It makes you think about the limits of the law and this very human desire for retribution when the traditional avenues fail.
You know, and it's not just the characters and their moral dilemmas that contribute to that tension in Hunting Game. Candice Fox also uses the setting to really amplify that sense of unease.
I love when the authors do that. They make the setting almost like another character in the story. How does she do that specifically?
Well, she doesn't explicitly name the city where the story takes place, but she describes it in a way that makes it feel incredibly gritty, almost claustrophobic. Think like dark alleys, a sense of constant danger lurking around every corner.
It's like the city itself becomes a reflection of the darkness and moral ambiguity we see in the characters.
Exactly. It reinforces this idea that no one is truly safe, that everyone is caught in this web of uncertainty and potential violence. And she uses these really vivid sensory details to bring that setting to life. You can almost smell the decay, hear the deafening traffic, feel the oppressive heat.
So immersive. You're not just listening to the story, you're practically living it. And it makes you understand how the characters surrounded by that kind of constant pressure might be driven to make choices they wouldn't ordinarily consider. But, with all this talk about darkness and tension, I have to ask, is there any hope to be found in hunting game? Or is it all just doom and gloom?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think that's part of what makes the book so powerful. It doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of the world that Fox has created, but it also shows these little glimpses of humanity, of resilience, even in the midst of all the chaos.
So it's not entirely bleak. There are moments of light peeking through.
Yeah, definitely. For example, even in the midst of their own pain and anger, some of the characters manage to find ways to connect with each other, to offer support and compassion. There are these small acts of kindness, these moments of shared humanity that really stand out against that backdrop of darkness.
That's good to hear. Sometimes it's those small glimmers of hope that make all the difference. They remind us that even in the darkest of times, there's still good in the world and in people.
Yeah, and it speaks to the complexity of the characters, too. They're not just driven by vengeance or despair. They're capable of empathy and love, even for those who have wronged them.
Which circles back to that blurred line between good and evil, right? It reminds us that people are multifaceted. We're all capable of both great and terrible things.
Absolutely. And that's what makes Hunting Game such a thought-provoking read. It doesn't offer easy answers or simple solutions. It forces you to grapple with the messiness of life, the gray areas of morality, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the parents who are victims in this story. You said they're driven to extremes by the loss of their child. Can you talk a little more about that? What kind of extremes are we talking about?
Well, imagine the worst possible thing, losing a child. Now, imagine that loss compounded by a lack of answers, by a system that seems indifferent to your pain. That's the reality these parents are facing in Hunting Game.
Nightmare scenario.
Exactly. And it's in that space of profound grief and desperation that they're driven to make choices that under normal circumstances would be unthinkable.
Right.
They're willing to break the law to risk their own safety, to do whatever it takes to find answers or bring their child's abductor to justice.
It's a primal instinct, right? To protect your child, to seek justice for them, even if it means sacrificing everything.
And Candice Fox does such a masterful job of capturing that raw, visceral emotion. She puts you right there in the shoes of these parents, so you can feel the weight of their grief, the intensity of their determination.
Like, you're right there with them, experiencing their pain, their anger, their desperate hope. It's intense.
Yeah, and it raises some really tough questions for the listener, too. How far would you go to find justice for your child? What lines would you be willing to cross? And what price would you be willing to pay?
Those are heavy questions.
Yeah.
But that's the power of great storytelling, right? It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths and to look inward.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of situations, the human capacity for love and resilience can be incredibly powerful. But it can also lead to choices with devastating consequences. And that's the real heart of Hunting Game.
Okay, and we can't forget about the parents on the other side of this equation, the ones who have committed these terrible acts, often in the name of love for their own children. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure. These characters are equally complex and often driven by a love for their children that's become distorted, twisted in a way that leads them to make choices that harm others.
It's a fascinating concept. How can love something that's supposed to be so pure and good become a motivator for such darkness?
That's exactly the question that Candice Fox is exploring in this book, and she doesn't offer any easy answers. She presents these characters with all their flaws and complexities, leaving it up to the reader to wrestle with the moral implications of their actions.
So it's not about judging these characters as simply good or evil, but about understanding the factors that have shaped their choices.
Precisely. We see how desperation, fear, and this warped sense of protection can lead even well-intentioned people down a path of destruction. And that makes the story all the more unsettling because it forces us to acknowledge the potential for darkness that exists within all of us.
It's a sobering thought, but an important one. Hunting Game doesn't shy away from these uncomfortable realities of human nature. It forces us to confront the fact that even love in its most extreme forms can have these really dangerous consequences.
And it reminds us that the line between victim and perpetrator can be incredibly thin. Sometimes the very act of seeking justice can lead to actions that blur that line, making it difficult to determine who is truly right and who is wrong.
That's what makes this book so compelling. It challenges our preconceived notions of justice and morality, forcing us to confront the complexities of the human experience. And it does all of this within this gripping narrative that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
It's a masterclass in suspenseful storytelling. And that full cast narration just adds another layer of depth and intensity, bringing those characters to life in a way that's truly captivating. You're not just listening to a story, you're experiencing it, feeling every emotion as if you were right there in the thick of it.
I completely agree. It's one of those books that stays with you long after you've finished listening.
Wow.
It sounds like Candice Fox has created a world where the stakes are incredibly high, both emotionally and morally. And that full cast narration really brings it all to life, immersing you in the story and the characters' struggles.
It does. The narration really elevates the entire listening experience, you know? You're not just passively listening, you're actively engaging with the story on this emotional level.
It seems like Hunting Game keeps circling back to this central question. What happens when those lines between victim and perpetrator, between justice and revenge, become blurred? It's as if Fox is challenging us to confront these gray areas where easy answers just don't exist.
That's exactly what makes it so thought-provoking. You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't offer these neat resolutions or these simple moral judgments.
Hmm.
Instead, it leaves you with more questions than answers, forcing you to really examine your own beliefs about justice, morality, and what you might be capable of in extreme circumstances.
And that's something we try to do here at Goddess Garden Book Chat, right? To choose books that not only entertain, but also make us think, make us grow, and help us connect on a deeper level.
Absolutely. We want to spark conversations, challenge assumptions, and explore these really complex themes that shape our lives. And Hunting Game definitely does that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this discussion? What's that lingering thought that you hope stays with them?
I want listeners to consider this. Imagine yourself in a similar situation, faced with this unimaginable loss, a system that may or may not deliver the justice you seek. What would you do? What lines would you be willing to cross? And what consequences would you be willing to bear?
That's a powerful question. It's not about finding the right answer, but about really wrestling with those moral dilemmas and exploring those gray areas where the choices aren't so clear-cut.
Exactly. And that's what we hope to achieve with these deep dives. To create a space for those conversations, to encourage critical thinking, and to help you connect with the stories and themes in a way that is truly meaningful.
So to all our Goddess Garden Book Chat listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of Hunting Game.
Yeah.
We hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about and discuss.
Don't forget to share your thoughts and insights in our Goddess
Hi,
Garden Book
readers.
Chat
Welcome
group.
to the personal
We're so eager to
perspective
hear
that I
your
have
perspectives and continue
about
the
this
conversation.
very interesting
Until next time,
audiobook.
happy reading and happy listening.
This read is one of those books you find in audio that when you're a member, there are books that are available to you as if you were in a library setting and you check the book out and give it back when you're done. And when I saw that Krysten Ritter and Anthony Mackie were voicing an audio original called Hunting Game, I originally went into this for the energy of their talent. These are two celebrity talents that I've enjoyed when I've seen performances they've done elsewhere. So I was so looking forward to what they were going to bring to a book. But aside from that, you really don't get Anthony Mackie and Krysten Ritter energy. They absorb these characters beautifully. And one of the things about Hunting Game is it's the kind of book that if you have children, you can put yourself in this situation. But I think you can even extend it beyond whether or not, if this happened to your child, if this happened to anyone you truly cared about, and you had the means to affect how this was being pursued, how the timeline was breaking down from the time that they become a victim to when you can take action versus what you're waiting for in law enforcement, was a really gripping dynamic in this book. It oddly wasn't one I was expecting because I listened to this thinking that this was going to be a pretty straight through story. But when you had both sides of the coin reflected in how this played out, and at the middle of this is an innocent child and a creepy money grubbing sleazeball, you really start to ask yourself questions in the middle of listening to a book. Have you ever done that? You get so wrapped up in what the story sort of drops in your lap that you start thinking through it as if it were happening to you or somebody you know, and you have to rewind because you kind of lose the thread of the book because you get caught up in this whole other thing that's going on in your head. Like, I cannot believe this. Somebody had done that to me. Or let me tell you this, and there is no way I would put up with that. And 10 minutes have gone by and you're like, wait, what happened? And you got to backtrack. I do that quite a bit in audiobooks, which is the beauty of the rewind button, let me tell you. So I had to deal with how I felt about both sides of this issue. And trying to respect both sides of this issue. And it is so odd that in 2025, when I read this book, so much about it was reflective of something that's currently happening in our country when it comes to dealing with the adverse effects of not getting what you need, and the whole family pays the toll when you make a decision to act out on your own and pursue justice your way versus the quote unquote right way. Because I lean toward, is it necessarily the right way when you understand and recognize when you live a law abiding life and you still can't find the justice that you seek, it leaves a very bad taste in your mouth. And I was very respectful of that. In this story, you definitely have to deal with that. And you also have to deal with reading this story and understanding that part of you is in the justice system fighting for right, and how you feel about the justice system outside of this narrative, and how in the depiction of this particular story, how it really addresses whose needs are being met. Are you meeting the needs of your superior officers to get resolution? Or are you meeting the needs of the family so that they can get what they need to close this chapter in their life and move forward? Now, sympathy was not easy to come by for me. I didn't feel sympathy for almost anybody in this book except the child, because it was so hard. I mean, I get what everybody's going through, don't get me wrong, but these are not necessarily the most likable people you're going to run across in a book. And I had to recognize and check and pull myself out of it, which I often do when it comes to fiction, not confuse how I feel with the way that the story is trying to shape a narrative for those in this actual situation. But the cast did such an amazing job, and it's dramatized, so you're getting sound effects that add to the reading, which to me are always a plus in an audiobook. When you get that dramatization of sound effects to sort of put you in that moment, in that atmosphere, and sort of experience a lot of the anxiety, the hype, the emotion, the passion, or the fear. I think it really does enhance an audiobook's preparation for how it's going to be received. So, in that vein, I had to give this an absolute 5-star rating. The cast that they assembled to bring this story to life could not have been chosen better. And even though this is a sensitive topic, and it's something that everyone in some way can relate to, even if you don't have children, you can relate to how this story plays out. I think it was handled in a way that was sensitive to you. The reader may not necessarily feel this way, but it makes sense that this is the journey that these characters were on. So I just wanted to add my personal perspective to the deep dive that I always present within a book, because one of the greatest things to come out of me doing this, and the absolute ridiculous amount of books that I have read, is when I put together my review and I script it out and I look at the way that I want to say that Hunting Game is a great book and I really like what happened, I cannot do justice on a granular level of what these books actually offer us, the way that when I put it through my filters and shape a deep dive and provide that perspective to us as a group, us as a reader, I think I can't give you what it does. And I know we're caught in the middle of this question of how much impact are bots going to have, or how much impact is AI going to have on our lives? And is it replacing the authenticity of what an individual could bring to talking about a particular topic, issue, story, whatever it is? And to that, I say, I have discovered a way to take everything that I've enjoyed, give it new breath, give it a proper explanation without convoluting it with my own personal perspective, whether I like it or I don't. I'm not going to yuck your yum. If I read it from cover to cover, I'm going to talk about it. It doesn't matter the genre, and it doesn't matter per se that it is something that I would recommend or I won't. If I manage to make it through, I want to talk about it. I spend money on it. I'm a member. Let's get into some of these books. So, to that end, I hope that we as a book club appreciate that though I run through these filters that do the deep dives, these are my words. They are constructed from what I write and how I feel. And I have to give credit where credit is due. It's in at least a couple of cases allowed me to look at what I read differently, because the deep dive tears back layers that I wasn't paying attention to, because I don't read on that in-depth level. I don't pretend to be that scholarly book lover that has such deep love of the antagonist and the protagonist, and I know exactly what it means when they structure the sentence that now what had happened was is how I read almost everything. Everything I read starts out with, okay, so this dude met this chick, or see what had happened was, or you see they were over here when they should have been over there. That went wrong. That's always how I've enjoyed books from a child to today. And so when I put these book reviews together, I hope that you're enjoying them as much as I am. I hope you're getting as much out of them as I am. And know that they are an active part of what I'm always going to present to us as a club. I'm always going to be here in the beginning, in the end, sometimes even in the middle. It depends. Because when I do book versus film, I move around. That's all me half the time. Only thing I've used about once, and that was for the book versus film 365. Don't even get me started. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure we as a club understand where we're going in 2025. That infusion is always going to be there. It's always going to come from me. And it's only going to get better. Because truth be told, I am in search of the perfect AI to do my deep dives. So she could stand there and look pretty and talk about these books and give all of us something that we may have to go back and get our highlighter out and review again. But as I said before, in the meantime and in between our time together, I hope you're enjoying everything about being a part of the Goddess Garden Book Chat Club. And I hope you'll be back, because don't forget, February is coming. And I have done the work. I've been reading and reading and reading. A lot of these books are not new to me. I would say less than 10 of the books that I introduced in February are going to be new. So join me, because we got some good stuff. And if you haven't seen the preview, go back in my YouTube library and check out what's coming out in February, because I think we're going to have a good time. I'll see you later, my friends, on the next chapter.